Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Short Play, a series of quick tours of games I like on a variety of platforms, new and old. Today we're looking at Microsoft Flight Simulator, the latest version, which was a 2020 release from Microsoft and part of the long-running Flight Simulator series that began in 1979 with Bruce Hartwick and Stu Moment's FS1 Flight Simulator for the Apple II. Now, a full history of the Flight Simulator series is well beyond the scope of one video, but suffice to say it's always been an important series to me and my family. And my father in particular has always been an aeroplane enthusiast, and he was so taken with the 1984 release of Flight Simulator 2 for Atari 8-bit by Sublogic that he penned an extensive review for Page 6 magazine, and then subsequently went on to become a regular contributor for the magazine with a specialism in flight simulation and making music with MIDI on Atari computers. So suffice to say that Flight Simulator has always been a big part of my life, of my dad's life, and indeed of our whole family's life really. So I was very excited to check out this new version, and I know my dad has been curious to see how it works as well. So I guess this one's for you, Dad. Let's go play Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Okay, here we are with Microsoft Flight Simulator. More specifically, Microsoft Flight Simulator's loading screens, because this game takes quite a while to load. And I think it's important to be honest about that. This is a substantial piece of software, and so when you first start it up, you can expect to be sitting around for quite a long time. So before we do anything else, I'm going to show you just how long you have to sit around doing nothing. But at least they give you a nice chilled out piece of music to listen to while that's going on. And this intro sequence as well, which some might argue sets some unrealistic expectations of frame rate in particular, but it does give an idea of what the sim can look like if you have hardware that is up to it. But no, that's a video sequence, that's not real time, so sorry to disappoint you. This is the real loading screen. This is actually handled slightly differently to Flight Simulator X, which is the previous installment in the Flight Simulator series, because no one counts Microsoft Flight, because no one played it. But yeah, Flight Simulator X basically had a launcher that ran on the Windows desktop, and you set up your flight and your flight plan and chose your aircraft and installed your mods and all that sort of thing from that launcher. And it then basically loaded the sim after that. In this version, instead, what happens is that it loads the sim in, then you can set up your flight, and then it does a little bit more loading based on exactly where you want to start. But it does mean you can get into the air slightly more quickly after starting the application, I guess, but you've just got that very long initial load time. But if you've ever played an open world game of any description on any platform in the last 5 to 10 years or so, I guess. Oops, dropping my bottle of drink there. If you've played any sort of open world game in the last 5 to 10 years, then you should be well familiar with this sort of load time. But yes, while we wait then, I'll explain what the plan is for today. I was actually going to record a bunch of Atari A to Z stuff before this, but I decided that in the interests of sort of having the best possible experience with this, I'd record this first. So this is actually my first recording session of the day today. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I want to use the live real-time features in this, so the live real-time traffic and the live real-time weather and that sort of thing. So what we're going to do, as I mentioned in the intro, this sim is of particular interest to my dad. So with my dad in mind, we're going to go to the world map. We're going to start from the airfield that is close to where he lives, and where my mum lives as well, obviously, which is Little Gransden in Cambridgeshire. You'll see that zooms us right in there. This is a little grass strip that's in the middle of nowhere, so if you've never heard of it, I would not be surprised. So I'm going to set that as our departure place, and then our arrival airport I'm going to set as Southampton International, which is where I live. So that will give us a flight of 86 nautical miles, should take about 48 minutes altogether. So obviously that's going to run quite long for this kind of video, but you know, it's worth it, because we'll be able to do a bit of sightseeing on the way. I'm going to show you what this sim does. We're doing VFR rules, so my aim for this is, rather than taking a direct straight route there, I'm going to try and use some visual landmarks and point out some things along the way, so we can hopefully do a bit of, well, I hesitate to call it sightseeing, unless you really, really want to see the city of Stevenage. But anyway, yes, so we're going to fly from Little Grandson to Southampton International. So not much wind in either location at the minute. Flight conditions up here, you see I've set to live players and live traffic. So that means we'll have some real people flying in the sky, as well as some real flights, some real world flights that are actually up in the sky right now. Because I've set those two to live, it's also defaulted the weather to live. It is 10 to 6 on the 31st of August 2020 as I'm recording this. So it's still light outside, so hopefully what we should get as we fly along, not sure exactly what time the sun sets, but along the flight we should start to see the light fading a bit, and we may even have a nice sunset as we arrive in Southampton International. So we're going to be flying the Cessna 152 today. There are quite a few different aircraft available in Flight Simulator 2020, or just Microsoft Flight Simulator as they prefer to call it. But I always have an attachment to the Cessna 152 because that was the one that was in the earlier versions of Flight Simulator, starting from the Atari ST version. I think was my first experience with it, because the 8-bit version was a Piper Cherokee, as I recall. And yeah, so I just have a lot of attachment to the Cessna 152. It is the aircraft that I associate with Flight Simulator the most. It is very much the Nissan Micra of the aviation world, in that it's quite a boring, quite a slow aircraft, but everyone knows how to fly it. And it's probably the one that you learned in. So that's the one we're going to take because I know how to handle it more than anything else. ATC Options, I'm going to be childish and put some amusing... There we are. Just so we can be easily identified. And then we hit fly and off we go. I think we're all set. So, the default settings for the simulator will plop you on the end of the runway that you selected, or if you've chosen to start at a particular landmark or a particular set of coordinates, it will start you in mid-air with your engine going and everything like that. So, but the default settings we've got here, because we're starting from an airfield, it's going to plonk us on the end of the runway. The engine will be running and ready for us to go. Optionally, you can choose to set yourself up so you start in like a parking area at an airport, and you can also turn off certain assists so that you have to actually manually start up the aircraft in there. And there's some checklists to help you out with that in the sim. And at any point you can delegate those to the AI as well. So there's basically a sort of virtual co-pilot that you have along with you. So if you're not sure how to do any of the things on the checklist, you can just delegate that to the AI and they'll take care of it for you. By default, the AI just takes care of all of those things anyway. So as soon as you spawn, as soon as you finish loading, you're ready to go. Okay, so before you start, you get a nice little cinematic flyby of your starting point with a bit of information about your aircraft and perhaps the airport that you're starting from. Lovely close-up of some grass there. That's my aircraft taxiing into position. So the AI is taking care of that for me. There's my tail number and some more grass. At any point you can skip this if you want to. You can just hit ready to fly and it will just plonk you down in position, ready to go. Otherwise you can just enjoy the ride and be ready to start. Okay, so there we are, in position, ready to go. And here we are. Right, so before we start, just a quick look around. So, much like in Flight Simulator X, we are no longer confined to a two-dimensional bitmap of a cockpit. You can freely look around. If you've got fancy head tracking hardware, you can actually move your head around to look around the cockpit. You can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. And you can click on things. So you can click on the yoke to make it disappear if you want a better view of stuff. Excuse me. But also all of the controls that are interactive you can actually click on and use as well. So if you don't know the keyboard controls, because there's a lot of keyboard controls in this game as you might expect, you can just click on the things in the cockpit as if you were actually reaching out and touching them. Now there's no VR support in this as yet. It is planned for the future, but it doesn't exist at present. So for now, you can hold down the right mouse button and look around like that. Alternatively, you can press Control and various number keys, and that will cycle you through various different predefined camera angles for your cockpit. Excuse me, that was my virtual pilot voice telling me to get on with it. You can also use the cursor keys to actually sort of move your position in the cockpit as well. So you can actually sort of slide around, pretend to be the co-pilot. You can stand up. You can't lean your head out the window, sadly. And there's no opening of the door to have a wee in mid-flight. So you just better hold it. Anyway, enough talking. Let's get in the air. So I'm going to click off the parking brake, which I'm using a joystick to do that. So I've assigned a button to that, but we can also do that using the parking brake control there. And control space will take you back to the front facing view as well. So now we are ready to go. So we open the throttle. Use our rudders to make sure we stay lined up on the runway. Build up some speed. Enjoy the fact that you can hear both the engine sound and your wheels rolling along the ground. And there's different wheels rolling along ground noises for different surfaces as well, which is nice. And then we rotate. And off we go. Now, in this flight, I'm not going to be super realistic or anything. I'm probably going to break all sorts of civil aviation rules and things, but it's all in the interest of showing you around a bit. So, we will begin by just getting a little bit of altitude. Maybe 1,000 feet or so. So at the moment I'm just doing this with the stick, which is why I'm wobbling around a little bit. You can use your trim controls if you want as well. There seems to be a much bigger emphasis on using the trim in this than in previous versions of Flight Simulator. It's not something I'd ever sort of really felt I had to use before, but in this one, yes, you very much do need to use your elevator trim. Right, and I'll make a turn over this way. I'm going to pull back on the throttle a bit as well. This is as we pass by Dick Scribbler. He's flying at 3,500 feet, somewhere in the distance. Those are all other players, by the way, if you weren't sure. So, there's the airfield we took off from. All of these markers you can turn off, by the way, so if you want a sort of purer experience, you can very much do that. So let's trim down a bit so we can see what we're doing. In fact, what I'll do is I'll switch to the external view for now. So the external view is really nice, especially if you're new to flight simulators, because it allows you to enjoy this game a little bit more like you're playing something like Pilot Wings. So you've got all the pertinent information around the outside of the screen, so you can still fly the plane and do everything from this external view. You can just see a little bit more, and you can sort of admire the aircraft, and it's also a lot easier to admire the scenery from this angle as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn left here, and just beyond the end of the runway you might be able to see a road passing from right to left down there. I'm going to follow that road. And that road splits in two there. We're going to go straight on down this road into this sort of wooded area down here. And this wooded area down here is actually the village where I grew up. So we're going to fly over my parents' house in a moment. Now, this is one of the areas that is rendered in quite low detail. So, from a distance, this looks great because it's all based on satellite photography and so on. But if you get close up, the houses aren't photorealistic and accurate or anything like that. But the actual layout of the streets and everything is correct. So, we're just passing over my parents' house right now. And over the local timber company. And on to Eltersley Road, which is a long and twisting country road. But it's not like a super difficult to navigate country road or anything like that. My cat Patty is coming to help, so if anything strange happens to the controls, you know that is what is happening. Yeah, so this isn't like a single track country road or anything like that, but it is long, it goes through fields. There's not a lot of sort of things to see along the way. There's like a couple of houses along the way, but it's mostly farmland around there. So as we follow that road, let's just hop back into the cockpit. And we can actually poke our head up and get a better view of what's going on if we want to. Okay, so we're going to go right at this T-junction here. And then left at this next one here. So I'm taking a very, very specific route here. I'm following some roads, because these are the roads that I travelled down as a kid to get to various places that were important to me and my family. So this sort of tree-lined road that we're going to follow right now, this is a long main road that leads from our home village to the nearest town. I'll trim up a bit because we're losing a little bit of altitude. And so that nearest town was about 7 miles away from us. That's where I went to school, or secondary school anyway. That's where we had to go if we wanted to go shopping for anything other than the bare essentials, because our village did have a village shop. But it was very much what you would expect from a village shop. It sort of sold the bare essentials and the basic groceries and stuff you might need, but it was a lot more expensive than going to a supermarket, and there were certain things that you wouldn't be able to get there. But it was always nice to support your local village business, so people would still buy things from the village shop. But if you wanted anything more than what that shop offered, you would have to go to the next town over. And one of the routes to do that was to follow this road. So the town we're heading to here, if you're wondering, is called St Neots. It's not the same as the St Neots that is in Cornwall. Is it Cornwall or Devon? One of those anyway. Yeah, so not the same one as those. Equally unremarkable, I believe. But again, because it's somewhere that I grew up, it's somewhere that I always have a certain amount of fondness for. Actually dropping down a bit there. So I assume that's to do with the weather or the thermals or the air currents and that sort of thing, because all that sort of thing is modelled quite intricately in this sim. So you might find as you start flying over a more populated area, you'll really notice the feel of the air changing. Okay, so we're flying over St Neots. We want to head a little bit in this direction. Wasn't quite paying attention to where we are, so let's just head on over here. Don't know how well you can hear it on the recording, but from this external view as well, there's some lovely ambient noises as well, like you can hear the wind. So this is one of many things that makes this an enormously relaxing game to play if you're just going for like a pleasure flight or something like that. Over on the right there, those are some, I think they're like gravel pits or something like that, but they've been full of water for as long as I can remember. I remember for a school geography project, we had to plan turning that area into a sort of parkland area and decide what we were going to do with that. Okay, so what we're looking for is the main road. Which actually I have a feeling we might already be on. I kind of slightly lost track of where we were at one point, but I think we might already be on it. Because we're heading south. Which will take us towards London. So this should be the A1, which is a major road that runs pretty much the length of the country. Also known as the Great North Road, because I think it's an old Roman road. Or at least part of it is anyway. But it's one of the main routes up and down the country. Because it just runs pretty much from north to south. Yeah, we are heading in the right direction because there's Sandy Airfield over on the right hand side. Sandy is another town that is fairly close to us. Or fairly close to where my parents live, I should say. Fairly close to where I grew up. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I find that you never really stop thinking of where you grew up as home. Because you spend such a significant portion of your life there. So many of your defining experiences are there that it's hard not to think of it as home, even if you spend even more of your life somewhere else. Just going to pop back to the normal view just so we can get some... That's not a helpful view, is it? That's... Don't know what's going on there. Back to the normal view, please. Just want to look behind me. Apparently we're not allowed to do that anymore. Normally you press control and down arrow and you'll sort of look out the back of the aircraft, but that seems to just be plunging my head into my seat for some reason. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, here we are. This is the town of Sandy. Which is the town that our postal address was based on. Even though the fact we lived a long way out of it. As far as letters were concerned, we lived in the Sandy area. Over on the right there you can see Hatfield, home of the Galleria, which is a large outlet mall. I wonder if that's modelled in this actually. We'll have to go down and take a look. Right, let's ease off on the power a bit and come down slightly and take a closer look. The main thing I knew Hatfield for growing up was that when we were taking the A1 down to London, Hatfield was where there was a tunnel. It was very exciting. So initially it was just a tunnel, but then ultimately it went underneath this outlet mall called the Galleria. Which I remember them being... There was a lot of excitement over it being built. But then after it was built, no one really seemed to give a shit. I don't see it. Maybe this isn't Hatfield at all. I'm not sure. I forget the order of towns we go through as we pass down the A1. We certainly do pass by Hatfield at some point. Anyway, back to the cockpit. A wind farm down there. Not doing a great deal at the minute because there's no wind. Yeah, I really have messed up that view somehow. I'm not entirely sure how I've done that. Oh well. Not to worry. So we continue following this road. I don't remember seeing those wind farms before, actually. But then whenever I'm driving down this road, I tend to be paying attention to the road rather than what's nearby, so I'm sure they are there, really. It's just it really occurred to me to look, I guess. So, you're probably wondering, since this game is basically the new Can It Run Crisis, what I'm running this on, and how well it's running. So I actually upgraded my PC slightly to get this working a bit better, because my previous PC just wasn't quite up to the job, so I replaced the motherboard and the processor. So what you're watching this on now is a Ryzen 2700X processor with an Nvidia GTX 970, and that's enough to get it running at medium detail at a pretty consistent 30 frames a second, which is what you're seeing now. Now, of course, it's very easy to get snobby about graphics and go, ooh, oh, 60 frames a second or nothing. But in flight simulation, particularly civil aviation flight simulation, 30 frames a second tends to be considered perfectly acceptable. Because for the most part, you're not doing anything too ridiculous that requires the sort of additional accuracy that smooth movement provides. And it's still plenty smooth to be able to do stuff. And it's certainly a far cry from that original Atari 8-bit version that I mentioned in the introduction, which ran at approximately 5 frames a second. So but yeah, I think it was Tom's Hardware did a feature shortly after this came out that said, or it's a news story or something like that, that said that in the week after this came out, worldwide people had spent something like $6 billion on new PC parts. I'm happy to be part of that $6 billion. Because clearly people wanted to enjoy this, and they wanted to enjoy it to its full potential, which is fair enough, because it's a lovely looking piece of software. And as I say, I'm running this on medium detail right now, and it still looks gorgeous. So don't feel too bad if your PC's not up to running at ultra settings. Very few PCs these days are up to running this on ultra settings. This has been designed with at least a 10-year lifespan in mind. Meaning that the top end of what the graphics engine is capable of. I just realised I still have my flaps down. It's embarrassing. The top end of what this graphics engine is capable of is sort of not really possible unless you're spending thousands and thousands of pounds on hardware. And so as those 10 years go on, that hardware will become more and more affordable, and more people will be able to enjoy this to its full potential, which is great. So you can enjoy it nicely now, but in a few years' time it'll look even more amazing. And if you're wondering about all the internet streaming side of things as well, you can turn it off if you want. And in fact, that does help performance slightly because it's not having to sort of download information as you're flying along. And it still looks pretty nice even with all that turned off. But obviously, if you've got the bandwidth and a decent connection, you may as well keep it on, because it's one of the things that makes this experience so special, really. So we all used to take the piss out of my dad for flying the aeroplane for hours at a time, but you know, as I've got older and sort of had much more of a need to unwind and de-stress and that sort of thing, experiences like this have become much more appealing. And the fact that you can now enjoy an experience like this with such incredible graphical fidelity is remarkable, really. Right, is that the M25 is the question? Yes, I think it is. So, we're going to turn right here. And so this is the outskirts of London. You can see on our left-hand side right now. So we're now following the M25 London Orbital, which is one of the most notorious roads in the UK for getting traffic jams on it. And down below you can see one aspect of this simulation being completely unrealistic is that the road is almost entirely clear on a bank holiday. That would never happen. But yeah, if we were to fly off to the left a bit, we would end up in London. I think, anyway. Assuming I got this all right. I mean, this is a big if at this point. But I am trying to prove a point with this flight, that it is possible to do a completely VFR flight in this sim just by looking at landmarks that you are familiar with. I'm kind of surprised, actually. I would have expected all that air traffic to be in London. And maybe it is still in London. So we're still heading south. I'll give it a little bit more juice on the engine. We are dropping down a bit. Yeah, I would have expected there to be a lot of traffic around London. Just because there's a lot of sort of things to sightsee in London. There's like the Houses of Parliament and the clock tower with Big Ben in it and the various bridges. One thing Microsoft is going to need to fix is the fact that at the moment you can't fly under bridges. I tried to fly through Tower Bridge and crashed into nothing. Because as far as the engine is concerned right now, a bridge is simply a solid object. So I'm sure that will get patched in short order, because Air Force Proud 95 has made a video where he attempted to fly under the Golden Gate Bridge, and the person in front of him promptly came a cropper. And so if that doesn't bring attention to the issue, then nothing will. Now, the question is, I'm not 100% sure where the M3 is. And that's where we need to head next. But it's sort of close to Heathrow, I think. So if we can see where Heathrow is. I was going to try not to look at the map, but is that Heathrow there? I don't actually know the code for Heathrow. Oh well. We're going vaguely the right direction anyway. I'm sure we'll figure it out. But yeah, to be honest, the sort of experience that we're having here, this is all I want from an open world game, really. Just a world to explore. Because you've literally got the whole world to explore in this. Most of which is in a recognisable level of detail. Maybe all that traffic over there is at London. Maybe it's all at Heathrow. Because we can't be far from... No, I don't know. Like I say, we'll figure it out. If we end up at the south coast, we've gone too far. We're still ascending, should probably drop back that power slightly again. Because we've gone quite high. Well, I say quite high. 2,000 feet, which is not very high in aviation terms. If I was being safe and realistic, I would be much higher than this. But I'm more interested in seeing what's on the ground, so... London Colney over there. I thought we were further around than that. Or maybe London Colney Airport is, or airfield or whatever it is quite a way around the M25. There's a major road down there. I don't think it's that one. Or is it? Actually, it might be. Is it that? Where are we? No, we're nowhere near yet. I think we want to look for the next motorway. I have a feeling that one that we've just passed is the M4. But don't quote me on that. So over a bit more open countryside now. So yeah, you probably picture London, you probably picture huge busy city, but the outskirts in places are surprisingly rural. That's because these are the sort of the very extremities of where the greater London urban area has spread out and got its tendrils into. So we want to look out for a road that's heading west. So I wonder if it's this one coming up just ahead. What I'm doing there, by the way, is I'm holding the S key, and that, while you hold that, that locks the camera onto the nearest point of interest, which is usually an airfield or an airport. I'm going to go ahead and guess this is the M3. Because that sort of big whirly junction looks familiar. And if it's not, we'll have gone on a little adventure. Yeah, it's hard to tell from up here. But we'll figure it out before long, I'm sure. I do love this external view. I know it's not very realistic, but it's just really nice to be able to enjoy the scenery while still flying the plane. There are other ways to do this in this sim, of course. It's a great drone camera, which you can move around and freely position and explore the scenery and all sorts of cool things. But there's just something thoroughly pleasant about following along behind your own plane and enjoying the flight. Still not convinced this is actually the M3. It might be the M4. As I say, no matter though. I'll call it a little adventure. And as I hoped, we're starting to get some nice dramatic skies going on. Yeah, the further I go, the less convinced I am that we're going the right way, but... I mean, obviously we're not going the right way because we need to be heading southwest, but... You know what? I think I vaguely recognise that junction down there. I think it might be another place that I used to live. So I'm going to turn left here. And just follow that main road down to the south. Ease off on the power a bit. Let's drop a bit of altitude so we can get a slightly better view of what's going on down there. Not sure. I might be lost. But either way, we've had a nice trip. So if the road I turned left down was the one I thought it was, that would have been Chippenham that we just flew over. But I'm not 100% convinced of that. It's certainly the right neck of the woods. And if this road is the one I thought it was, then... oh, I don't know. Because we're heading towards the east again. Elstree. I'm trying to think if I recognise that name. This is the trouble I find with VFI navigation from above. It's like places that you're perfectly familiar with from ground level can look quite unfamiliar from up in the air. but they can also look strangely familiar. And you can think, oh, I recognise that. And then it turns out that you are completely mistaken. As I suspect I may well have been. Yeah, this doesn't feel right. Well, we'll figure it out. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to start following the roads. I'm going to head south. Because that's where we're supposed to be going. And while that has meant that this flight has taken a little bit longer than intended, we've had a nice opportunity to have a look at the British countryside and some towns that I don't know the name of, apparently. And just enjoy ourselves. And that's what this is all about, really. Enjoying yourself. I mean, yes, it's about being a realistic simulation of civil aviation. But primarily, it's about enjoying flying a plane, isn't it? One thing we can do to figure out where we are, I can bring up the ATC and we can look at the nearest airport list. That also tells us what those codes are on the map. I don't recognise any of them. So, like I say, let's just head south and hope for the best. That may be a bit more southwest. Big old cluster of people down there. Wonder if that's Heathrow. That would make sense. Like I say, I don't know Heathrow's airport code. But given that there's also a navigation marker there, that seems relatively likely. That might help us get back on course anyway. And the longer this flight takes, the more likely we are to have a nice sunset as we arrive at our destination as well. That camera working properly yet? Nope, still burying my head in the seat. Seems to be moving my virtual head backwards as I look from side to side for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, you can just use the mouse. And we look around, admire Invisible Copilot, and admire the fact that the Cessna 152 has a boot. I don't know why that amuses me, but it does. It's just so pleasant. Ricardo Speedy over there, living up to his name. I suspect I'm entering busy airspace right now, since there seem to be a lot of people around here. Yeah, you can see all the planes on the map there. So if we just skirt around their airspace so we don't get in the way too much. Not that you can... I don't think you can collide with other aircraft. Yeah, there it is. It is Heathrow. Not that you can collide with other aircraft in this, but, you know, it's just... consider it. If that's Heathrow, we might even be able to find the M3. So be a little bit wind picking up. Ah, that might be the motorway down there. The M25, possibly. Though we've been down this road before, haven't we? Yeah, a lot of people at Heathrow. Not surprised to see that. I haven't looked at the list of what the supposedly handcrafted airports are. But it would make sense for Heathrow to be one of them. Yeah, that is a big major junction down there. Question is, between what and what? At this point, I don't mind too much. We're just going to get where we're going, however long it takes. Like I say, we are at least going in vaguely the right direction now, so... So we just keep following along here until we find a road that's pointing southwest, basically. That should get us back on track for the original plan. As the sun slowly descends in the western sky. Yeah, I guess I must have just been a little bit too eager to turn off the motorway. And we needed to make our way a little bit further along it, even from the air. Because yes, well, while you can get where you're going a lot quicker from the air, in theory, it might still be quite a bit further than you think. Starting to be able to see the lights on the aircraft now. We might need to turn them all on in the cockpit at some point soon. There we go. That should have turned all our lights on now, I think. So both interior and exterior. What's that over there? White Wolfen. That doesn't really help me. Because I don't know where that is. It's always interesting to see how different towns are laid out as you fly over them. And although I haven't done a lot of flying around the rest of the world yet, I suspect that's something that's quite interesting to look at from country to country as well. So obviously everyone associates like American cities with the grid system and that sort of thing, but there are British cities that make use of that as well. But then there's also British cities that have sprung up around settlements that are centuries or even millennia old in some cases, so when that's the case, these streets tend to be a little bit more higgledy-piggledy. Let's probably pull up a bit. Trim up, please. Not that much. Maybe a little bit more power. So yeah, if you haven't figured it out, the pink line on the map there, that is the most direct route from our starting point to our destination. If we'd followed that, we'd have got straight there, but you know, it's much more interesting to go on a little adventure, even if it's an ultimately pointless one. I'm showing you the very best of the British motorway system. And some fields. Lots of lovely fields. Getting a little harder to see what's going on down there now. One thing this sim has shown me so far is that it's quite surprising how many planes are seemingly not designed with looking out of the window in mind. There's an awful lot of them. It just seems to be very, very hard to actually see out of. The Cessna is one of the better ones because at least you got those lovely big side windows there. But yeah, it's particularly like some of the aerobatic planes and stuff like that. It actually feels like it's quite difficult to see where you're going sometimes. So yeah, this flight is ending up being quite a bit longer than the 45 minutes it estimated for us, but I'm having a good time and I hope you are too. This is what Flight Simulator is all about. Going for a fly. Maybe something unexpected happening. And before you know it, Several hours have passed. I'm chewing through my fuel supply though. Hopefully we'll get there without having to worry too much about that. We've almost met up with our GPS path. We pretty much have met up with our GPS path. Alright, so in the interest of getting this done before an hour and a half has elapsed, let's head down in that direction and try and take a more direct route for now. As I say, part of the appeal of being able to do VFR in this is taking those indirect routes and taking in the scenery on the way, but we are starting to lose a bit of light now, and I do have other things to record today. As much fun as I'm having. So I guess we'll spend some time passing over some rolling English countryside. Trimming is quite tricky because you sort of seem to bob back and forth quite a bit. I'm sure there's a way to counteract that if you're more skilled at flying than I am, but I'm sure it's something that just comes with practice. But like getting truly level flight and holding it is surprisingly challenging. Right, how are we doing? Little way to go still, but we're on track. No, you can't click on the door handles to open it. That's a shame. And you can't open the window. Excuse me. My cat Meg has come to join us in the cockpit. How are you today, Meg? Good. Drifting off course a little bit. One thing I found you will want to spend a bit of time doing in this, if you are playing with a joystick setup, is you want to take some time to fiddle around with the sensitivity and the dead zone controls. As by default, this doesn't use any dead zone at all, which means that the slightest nudge on your joystick will have you moving. And just setting a little bit of dead zone in the middle will help you stay a little bit more in control. I think I might need to fiddle around with that a little bit more. Let's admire the instruments while we wait. Yeah, I'm really impressed with the modelling of these. It's just they look very authentic. They've got reflections in the glass, and even little things like the second hand on the clock moves very authentically. I really like the fact that this is sort of the iconic flight simulator cockpit, because it's what we've been looking at since Flight Simulator 2, basically. Because the Piper Cherokee cockpit is almost identical to this in terms of instrument layout. And so that meant when they changed from the Piper Cherokee to the Cessna 152 in Flight Simulator 2, they didn't really have to do anything to the interface because it was the same layout of instruments. But just over time it's just become more and more realistic, with things like the ability to look around and the physics of the cockpit and all that sort of thing. But yeah, this panel of instruments is... You know when someone says something to you and you just immediately associate a visual image with it? Like someone says Flight Simulator, I see that instrument panel. How are we doing? Getting there. So obviously that VFR map there is doing what either a glass cockpit GPS device or a standalone GPS device would be doing. And indeed in Flight Simulator X, I think you could pull up like a virtual handheld GPS device to follow your route along. But then there's also aircraft in this, like the Cessna 172, which is presumably one of the successors to the 152. That has a full glass cockpit setup with autopilot and GPS navigation and all that kind of thing in there. So actually flying it is very similar to flying this because it's a very similar aircraft in a lot of ways, but the instrument panel is completely different and incredibly daunting if you've never seen a glass cockpit before. It's just touchscreens and buttons everywhere, and there's like 2 analog gauges. So if you're more accustomed to seeing the iconic Flight Simulator instrument panel, yeah, the Cessna 172 might give you a bit of a shock. So be prepared for that. Like I say, I've also had a soft spot for the trusty 152, as boring as it is. I mean, as boring as any plane is. You know, it's still a thing that flies through the sky that, you know, if you think about it too hard, probably shouldn't be able to fly through the sky, but it does. So what's going on outside? Not much. Wonder where that is. Yeah, shouldn't be too long to go now. Oh, drifting off course quite a bit. Wonder if Kraken XX is at Southampton. Kraken XX isn't moving. He's at 196 feet. Which may well be on the ground. I saw someone else flicker into view then and disappear again. They must be right at the boundary of detection distance. Like I say, you can turn those nameplates off if they bother you, and you can even turn multiplayer off altogether if you don't want to be bothered by their aircraft. So if you want the sort of traditional flight simulator experience, which is the whole world to yourself, then you can do that if you want it. So, but it just adds a nice bit of life and colour to what's going on if there's other stuff flying around at the same time. It's always kind of interesting when you're up in the air. If you just look forwards, at times it doesn't feel like you're moving at all. But then, if you look over to the side, you can obviously see stuff going past you, but looking forwards, it's like you're just hanging in the sky. And I think that's sort of one of the core appeals of being up here. And one of the reasons why, yes, it could be a stressful experience, but it could also be an enormously relaxing experience too. And that's one of the things I'm finding really valuable about this game, is that when you just want to chill out and relax and just do something that, I don't want to say it's not super demanding on you, because if you let it be, this can be super demanding on you. Like you try and fly one of the airliners, that can be super demanding. At the same time, you can also then just put the airline on autopilot and then go off and chat up the stewardesses. But not that pilots do that, of course. No, no, no. But when you're flying, as I say, the Nissan Micra of the skies, like we are here, you can just enjoy the experience. Assuming your aircraft wants to stay level, that is. Behave. Hold it. That's not holding it, that's going up. I think Pacific Gymnast just lagged out there because he just went to negative. How many feet that was. Either that or he crashed. I don't know. I think he crashed because he's gone now. Bless him. Right, are we near enough to yell at Southampton yet? Not quite. We can contact Popham. That's not far out from Southampton. So we're nearly there. How's our sunset looking? Not quite full on sunset yet, but it's getting there. There's Popham over there. I think those two might be at Southampton, actually. Kind of surprising me, because like Southampton is one of the high detail areas in this. So like, I can go and find my house in Southampton, and it looks like my house. Albeit it's a version of my house that's been extruded from aerial photography rather than an actual one-to-one model of it. And I never think of Southampton as being sort of a particularly important or noteworthy place. But I guess for whatever reason, it was deemed important enough to have high detail here. And that also means that you get people hanging out at the airport as well. I was quite surprised when I turned on multiplayer for the first time earlier. And there were actually a bunch of people taxiing around and taking off and landing at Southampton. Inevitably landing the wrong way. So I had quite a harrowing takeoff at one point as a Airbus was landing on the runway in the opposite direction to me. But not my fault. I went where I was told to go. Coming up in an hour and a half. So much for 45 minutes, as I said. But we are nearly there. Leave that ATC window open just so we can contact Southampton Tower as soon as we get close enough to request landing. You don't have to do all the ATC stuff in this if you don't want to, but it's there, so you might as well. Adds a bit of interest to what's going on. I believe you can hand over the ATC duties to the AI if you want to as well, but by default that's one of the things that you're expected to handle. Pacific Gymnast is airborne again. Kraken XX is just hanging out though. Just chilling. A bit of welcome to Jammy322, I think that is. It also seems to be hanging out at Southampton International. Ooh. A little bit windy. blown to the side a bit. Time to take a little bit more active control, I think. Pacific Gymnast coming down again. Will they end up above sea level this time? No, going down. Oh. It was either lag or a hasty levelling off. And we're looking outside. Still open countryside. Okay, much closer now though. Okay, let's start losing a little bit of this altitude. Not that we've got a lot of altitude going on, but bring ourselves down a little bit. Just make landing a little bit easier. Nope, Southampton International is in range. Request a full stop landing.
Southampton Tower Farts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango is 8 miles northeast with Echo to land. Farts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango Southampton Tower. Fly straight in runway 20. Altimeter tree 0.13 wind 202 at 10.
It is a little bit windy here, that's why it's getting blown around a bit. 10 knot wind.
Make straight in runway 20 Farts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango.
Actually, it should be coming in at quite a good angle. Given that the runway is 200 degrees. Actually, that means we probably want to be a little bit to the right. Let's work on losing some of that altitude. So we're ready to actually set her down. Well, I might just be able to see the runway. Not sure though. It might be something else. That marker's definitely Southampton International though. 5 miles out.
Parts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango cleared to land runway 20. Wind 202 at 10.
Yep, that is the runway. So we want to head a little bit right just so we can line up with it. Keep descending gently. Gently, I said.
Parts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo
Oh.
Tango acknowledge last transmission.
Sorry.
Cleared to land runway 20 Farts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango.
I'm getting a little bit too low now. This is where I embarrass myself by completely fucking up the landing, isn't it? But, well... it's a part of life in the skies. Three and a half nautical miles out. A little bit low. Almost lined up as well. All right, lovely. Need to concentrate now. Don't want to come down too quickly. You know. I'll actually land on the runway. Let's give it some flaps. Lose a bit of speed, a little bit more lift. Throttle back a bit. A little to the right. I really like the fact you can actually hear the control surfaces in this as well. It's like when your engine's idling, you can really hear the elevators and the ailerons. A little bit high if anything, but you know, we'll get there. Our friend Kraken is parked on the runway, I think. Or is that the marker? That's just the marker, isn't it? Come on. Down we go. And flare. Lovely job.
Parts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango exit runway when able.
You got it, boss man.
Parts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango contact ground on 118.205.
Sure thing, buddy.
118.205 for Farts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango. Southampton ground farts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango taxi to parking. Farts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango taxi to general aviation parking using taxiway Bravo Alpha. Taxiing to general aviation parking via taxiway Bravo Alpha farts Foxtrot Alfa Romeo Tango.
Now, I'm never 100% sure of the conventions of, parking an aircraft, but in my experience, you turn right here, and then you look for the men with the high-vis jackets. I can't see. So let's just park up over here. That'll do for now. And shut down the engine. And we're good. Welcome to Southampton, everybody. That's fun. I enjoyed that. Hope you did too. I know it's nearly 2 hours, but well, we had a nice bit of whatever this was. Anyway, yeah, that is what you can expect from Microsoft Flight Simulator, running on a moderate rig. Like I say, my rig isn't the best by any means, but the processor was the main thing I upgraded from my previous one. I used to have a Intel i5 6600K, I think it was, and that wasn't quite up to the job of running this. So I upgraded to the Ryzen 2700X, which is sort of the top recommended processor. Technically, it's the Ryzen 2700X Pro, but that's more of a sort of business model of the processor, and the difference between that and the consumer model is pretty negligible from what I can make out. When I have a bit more money to hand, i.e. after I've paid off the processor upgrade, I'm probably going to upgrade the graphics card a bit as well, because the 970 is showing its age a bit in a few places, but it's still up to the job for the most stuff. But it'd be nice to be able to sort of crank things up a little bit in this game, just to see what effect that has. But anyway, there we go. We'll leave that there for now. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.